Time for the Patriot Mobile Member of the Week. That is Congressman Michael Gallagher of the House Armed Services Committee. Marine Intel Officer, no longer in the Marines. Once a Marine, always a Marine. But we bring him on for our defense talk each week. And normally I give him a hard time about Green Bay sports, but I got to get through too much. First, Congressman, I had Senator Rick Scott on last hour. I asked him, given what's happening in Venezuela with the arrival of Russians, soldiers, if he would be upset if the president used the George H.W. Bush Panama option. Would you be upset if he did?
Well, listen, I think we need to retain all options right now. We've made some pretty aggressive rhetorical commitments to the situation in Venezuela. And in particular, I think we need to encourage other parties in South America, particularly Colombia and Brazil, to take action. We need to work by, with, and through our partners. I think it would be unwise if we were to unilaterally involve ourselves militarily in Venezuela. There may not be anything we can do immediately to counter Russian presence, but we can continue to crush the Russian economy. We can continue to build up with our NATO armies, our long-range fires, and our sensing capabilities in Eastern Europe. And we can continue to make clear that neither will stop until Putin starts behaving. It's important to learn, though, that Putin is quite good at doing this by putting a small force footprint on the ground in various places, and now in Venezuela. He's fundamentally changed our decision options and said, my troops are here. Are you willing to risk drastic conflict escalation to remove them? And this all goes back to why we need to implement the national defense strategy and get our folks in the right locations around the world, particularly in what the national defense strategy calls the contact and the blunt layers. They need to be forward engaged. We need to have forward presence, because that in turn will give us options in the same way Putin has created options and denied us some options right now.
But right now, Mike Gallagher, they got 100 people there, and they can be gathered into an embassy. If they get 4,000 people there, it becomes us in Poland, right? And so I think they have thrown down the gauntlet here. I don't know that hopefully with Colombia and Brazil, I don't think we can allow that to endure. Cubans are one thing. You can only get the Cubans out, but Russia is a superpower, and I don't think you can allow that to metastasize.
Particularly given the red lines that the administration has laid down when it comes to Venezuela. I mean, the vice president himself wrote a very strong op-ed of support for the Guaido government and against the Maduro government in the Wall Street Journal. And so this would, I think, enormously undermine our credibility if we allow the Russians to continue to increase their presence and shore up their ally on the ground.
So let me ask you what I asked Rick Scott. If you wake up some morning and the 101st and the 82nd are parachuting into Caracas with Brazil and Colombia moving in at the same time, what's your emotional and intellectual reaction going to be?
Again, I mean, we'd have to see the details, but emotionally, I feel like right now, given how dangerous the world is, and not just emotionally, I'd say we should take the emotion out of it. Strategically, we have to be in the business of supporting allies and supporting the free world wherever we possibly can. And this isn't just this isn't a question of, the conflict in the Middle East. This is right in our own backyard.
No, this is Iran 1978, 2 hours from America.
Exactly. And so I think it further emphasizes the importance of guarding our credibility. And so I am open to the administration making the case. And again, I think as long as we do it by, with, and through, and in partnership with our allies, foremost among them Colombia and Brazil, we have an enormous array of options.
All right, now let me turn to NATO. Jonathan Swan tweeted out 5 minutes ago, important story lost in border maelstrom this week. The United States has suspended Turkey's participation in the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter jet program until Ankara cancels its planned purchase of a sophisticated Russian air defense system. Your reaction to our decision to halt the F-35 sales to NATO ally, but increasingly not ally Turkey?
It is absolutely the right decision. It is simply incompatible with our systems. It compromises our systems if we have the Turks plugged into a Russian system. And I hope that today we're having an address to Congress by the Secretary General of NATO. And I hope he not only addresses this issue, but I hope he addresses the broader technological issue. So, for example, we've had a lot of talk from the White House and from some of our allies about German defense spending and NATO defense spending. But really the most important thing going on right now with respect to NATO is whether some of our NATO allies are going to sign contracts for the future of the Internet for 5G with Chinese telecoms that have nefarious links to the Chinese Communist Party, most notably Huawei and ZTE. Vice President Pence rightly called out our allies at a great speech he gave in Munich and said we cannot ensure the defense of the West if our allies are dependent upon the East. And my hope is that the Secretary General of NATO, in talking to Congress today, will address that challenge head on. Because if our NATO allies sign deals with the Chinese Communist Party, that threatens the future of the free world, perhaps more than anything else that I can think of. And it's related in many cases to what we're seeing with Russia and Turkey right now.
Now, I want to play for you President Trump yesterday talking about Germany and then discuss with you the collapse of media credibility and what the president was actually saying. Cut number 11.
We're talking about Germany. I always talk about Germany. I mean, Germany, honestly, is not paying their fair share. I have great respect for Angela, and I have great respect for the country. My father is German, right? Was German. And born in a very wonderful place in Germany. And so I have a great feeling for Germany, but they're not paying what they should be paying. They're paying close to 1%, and they're supposed to be paying 2%. And the United States, over the years, got to a point where it's paying 4.3%, which is very unfair. And the U.S. GDP, especially under me, because the GDP has gone up so much, because it's 4.3 of a much larger GDP. So we're paying for a big proportion of NATO, which basically is protecting Europe. So we're protecting Europe. At the same time, they've taken advantage of us on trade. So
all right, now, Congressman Gallagher, what he meant to say is my father is from Germany, not born in Germany. It's clear what he meant. Fred Trump is an American who was born in America, and Donald Trump knows that. He's just talking like I say, I'm a German on my mother's side. I'm an Irishman on my mother's and my father's side. That's what he meant. And the media seized on that, as opposed to the point he was making is that Germany is stiffing us again. This is a twofold problem. Media is not serious, and Germany is not serious.
The media for the past 2 years have thoroughly beclowned themselves, and I think there is a collapse in trust among the American people in the American media. Our national media has become a national disgrace, and that's a problem because we need a functional media. We need a credible media, if for no other reason that we need a credible media to hold politicians accountable for things that they say, and that's absurd that the media would try and blow that up. The bigger issue here is, of course, Germany's contribution to the NATO alliance, Germany's contribution not only to its own defense, but the defense of Eastern Europe. We're lucky to have a fantastic ambassador in Rick Grenell that's pushing him in the right direction. Trump has consistently pushed our allies to do more, to spend more on their own defenses, and to wean themselves off Russian natural gas. He's absolutely right to do so. And recent NATO commitments to increase defense spending by $100 billion suggest that such criticism may be having a positive effect. But over the long term, we simply need the Germans to step up and do more. Oftentimes, well, if you look at the big picture, since 2014, German defense spending has increased by about 12%. That's a big jump, but it's not enough. At a minimum, they need to spend 1.5% of their GDP and get closer to their promised NATO goal of spending 2%. By the way, every American president since Eisenhower, every American Secretary of Defense has pushed our allies to do this. So this is not a new argument for the media that would try to make something new out of it. It's simply not. The Germans often hide behind the fact that the rest of our European allies might be nervous if they increase defense spending too much given their past, but I think that's a bunk argument. The Bundeswehr was the strongest non-American European military in the Cold War, and Germany can and do more to give Eastern Europe the same level of defense it saw during the Cold War. So, listen, let's not get bogged down in the fake media controversy. Let's focus on the big strategic issues here, which is, one, the future of 5G in Europe, and make sure that it isn't a future dominated by the Chinese Communist Party, and two, shoring up and reinvigorating the NATO alliance and convincing our allies to do more.
Now, I got to short your time today, Congressman, because the Secretary of State's coming along, and he is the original. I mean, he had your job as the weekly Patriot Mobile Member of the Week until he became CIA Director, so you get bumped, buddy. Sorry about that.
That's fine. The interloper himself, and that's a Tom Cotton term, not myself. I would never describe the Secretary of State. I hold in high esteem in such terms.
He used to be our weekly congressional guest. Now it's Mike Gallagher. Before that, it was Tom Cotton. Before that, it was John Campbell. Before that, it was David Dreyer. Thank you, Mike Gallagher. Talk to you next week.